do you think it makes sense to manufacture things locally and export, or manufacture in different manufacturing hubs and then basically export from there?
I think there's no one size fits all. I think for certain companies, it may be better to operate out of Pakistan because the operating costs are lower. I think that import substitution for our raw materials would really help. Not any one company cannot do everything. So you find the opportunity, you find a supplier somewhere. You want to come out with sauces, for example. Are there enough local bottle suppliers? Maybe that's an opportunity. Are there enough label manufacturers? So there's many things that go into creating a product, and if someone's looking to get into something, maybe something that works for a small business right now may not work for a business that's very, very large, which may need to have more efficiency by building units outside and creating and serving those markets quickly.
Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of All Things Money, and like always we continue focusing on more niche segments out there, and today we're talking about Shan Foods, and we have with us the co-chairperson of Shan Foods, Sammer. Hello Sammer, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. So Sammer, tell us about Shan Foods. Tell us the whole story.
Well, it's a company that my parents started back in 1981, and it's a packet spice mix company. We have recipes, plain spices, and a whole host of other categories like pickles and noodles and sauces. It's a food company that operates out of Pakistan.
So tell us about the growth story. How did you get so much growth?
Well, when my parents initially started the company, there was a desire to grow the company as anyone would. And there were two ways of achieving that growth. One was going through expansion in the local market, and the other was to go through export. And my parents decided that they would choose the export route, and we very early on started creating an export footprint. And that allowed us to bring in dollars to the country and allowed us to fund our own growth because we were not borrowing from banks and leveraging ourselves.
So when you say about exports, which would be your major export markets?
US, North America, UK, Europe, Australia, GCC, and
so essentially wherever you have some kind of diaspora, you will find Shan there.
We find Shan in 85 countries with direct distribution, and maybe more with people taking it themselves. We don't just target the South Asians anymore. Actually, there used to be a time when that was true. But I think there's a desire, and we're having a mainstream moment in the world where South Asian cuisine is, being accepted very widely across all kinds of ethnicities and races. So, some person living in, Hounslow eating butter chicken is very much still a consumer of ours, and someone in the south in Mexico may also be experimenting with Indian Pakistani food and may want to pick us up for those reasons. So yes, initial success was definitely based on South Asians, but we see our base expanding.
So I think that's a great point. So essentially, we're looking at Shan becoming a more global name and a global product at that. So how do you decide we're going to do this much of, let's say, butter chicken in this area, and we're going to send maybe like biryani masala somewhere else? How does that planning work out? Especially in the case of exports, like, I totally get that, you having a mainstream moment, and a lot of demand is coming up from non-South Asian household, non-South Asian consumers. So how do you decide, or how do you figure out which is the place, which product you really want to export?
I think we have a channel-wise approach, meaning that there are mainstream channels where you have your Tesco's and Aldi's and Waitrose and Walmarts of the world, and there's a specific shopper type that comes there. And those shoppers and those customers have a different need and requirement in terms of formats and packaging. And you have your ethnic distribution and your ethnic stores, your desi stores across the whole world. So if you're targeting the Asian consumer, you'll still find them going, primarily to their halal meat stores or South Asian stores.
Yeah.
So it's a two different channels, so we can talk to both people. And we don't have to really pick and choose. We can talk to one consumer in one way and another consumer in another way.
Okay. So without resorting to numbers, are your, let's say, export sales greater than your local sales? If not, then what really needs to be done to get there?
I think it's at parity, I'd say, at the moment. Half our business is international, half our business is local. Local is great because it gives us volumes. And it's what everybody here eats. 100% of the population is RTG. So we definitely want to gain here.
Let's talk about competition. Do you see any competition? I would think that masala would be very low value add item. It's not really not a lot is happening.
I mean, I would say there's no barriers to entry. I wouldn't say it's a very complex product, because any single recipe that you pick up, whether it's dal or even biryani, you have at least 15 different items going into it, and sourcing them and figuring out the supply chain for them. I think quality is a huge barrier, meaning that it's easy for anyone to enter it, but can they scale with the quality that, say, we are giving? That becomes harder, because then you have to develop your supply chain, and that doesn't happen overnight.
What about competition from across the border?
There is. We exist in India as well. We are in Reliance stores. It's about 200 stores in all across India. We have employees who are working there. So we definitely see that there's a huge market for us. Because in India, because we've been marketing ourselves internationally for so many years, the Indian consumer they see us as Pakistani, but they own us too. So if you want to make non-vegetarian food, who do you pick? Then you pick Shan. But if you're targeting, say, like someone who's eating only vegetarian food, maybe they're more loyal to some of their own spice companies and spice brands. But we're looking to change that too.
So in terms of global marketplace, I'm sure there's a lot of competition from Indian brands as well. How does that pan out?
There is, but I feel like we've carved a niche for ourselves in terms of flavor, taste, and quality that I feel, and even portfolio, that our Indian competitors and colleagues don't have. So whereas maybe it's easier for me to own a veg biryani, it's a little bit harder for them to own, say, like a kadhai or a Peshawari, anything meat.
Okay, so essentially it's more about product differentiation at this point.
Product differentiation, taste. The way that we design our spices and blends is definitely a little bit more Pakistani than Indian. There's certain things we don't put in our food, and that you'll find across in our recipes as well. We will change that when we're talking to the Indian consumer. So we may come out with products that talk just to them, and they fulfill those needs for them and do it in our way. So
again, coming back to the product, do you think Shan competes on the basis of cost or product quality?
Product quality for sure. Cost has never been.
You won't really get into a pricing war with.
No, we've always been premium priced across the world. We charge money for the product that we give. And the consumers understand that. If you want to buy low-cost spices, you're not coming to Shan. You want high-quality spices, you want value for money, you want a good taste, consistency, then you're picking us.
So, Sammer, tell us, how difficult is it to export from Pakistan?
It is...
we know, very difficult. And the journey, whatever we've talked about, a lot of businesses are saying the first shipment out there, the first push, that's a real difficult bit. So, what do you think you need to do? And you're in a fairly stable...
I think I'd start off by saying that before export, it's hard to be a business person in Pakistan, because the business problems don't begin at export. That's a part of it. So, you have 20 different things that you have to adhere to. Getting export orders is actually not that hard. TDAP in the past has done a good job in supporting small businesses also. They give you, you have all these trade delegations that go. If you're serious about getting consumers in, customers in, you can. That's not the hard part. I think the hard part is like making sure that you're able to deliver in the quality, consistency, and time and cost that you promised or you gave to your customer. That's hard. The instability is hard. The dollar going up and down, or just general fear in the air gets to you. Taxation is a big one. They've changed the taxation laws on exports. I think it was punitive on certain industries, but it affected everybody, even small businesses. So not just Shan,
All right. That makes sense. So what are your key raw materials that Shan works with?
Key raw materials would include all our basic spices. So your red chili, your turmeric, your salt, black pepper. These are the main ones: coriander, cumin.
And how do you source those?
Some of those are sourced locally because they grow here, and some of them are imported because they don't grow here. And if they do grow here, the quality is not that great. So we have to bring it in.
And where do you bring it from?
Across the world.
So in terms of backward integration, how do you think Shan has panned?
So that's a keen interest of mine. And we realize that given climate change, we source our chili from Pakistan, and we do that in it. We feel that it's a taste benchmark for us, that we can't substitute it. So we really had to go in and kind of start working with farmers, and taking a lot of initiatives to make sure that we have a sustainable supply chain. We started off with one, and now we've added our top 10 raw materials into that list and working to backward integrate for all of them. Because we can't grow until we have our supply chain sorted. That's a problem. And not everything grows here. So we've taken some long-term initiatives with, say, for example, LUMS, working to localize some of these raw materials here. Okay. And we've had some success with some of our initiatives as well. So it's a couple of years into it now. So it's been great.
Okay, that's perfect. So,
but we've had to take these initiatives ourselves, meaning as a corporate, that's not something that we're doing in tandem with the government.
Exactly. I always say, the government should not interfere in anything.
Well, they do it for other crops.
Well, that's why the other crops don't really do that well. That is really the problem.
I think I must highlight that chili and some of the agricultural inputs that we're talking about, you'll start seeing farmer suicides if things don't improve in those segments. Because farmers need to be taught how to run those operations as businesses and not at the whim of policymakers. And to say capitalist companies that are destroying the soil. Soil health should be a very important topic for all of us.
Oh, okay, and that's interesting. So talking about chilies, where do you procure chilies from?
From areas in Sindh and some areas in Punjab and Bhagat.
And what have you done or other companies have done in terms of really streamlining that value chain?
Well, it started off by making sure that the chili, this is an initiative taken by a couple of companies, our competition included a few years ago, where aflatoxins are something that develop in chilies over time once you start drying them. So the initiatives taken have started in the 90s, and we're continuing to keep on looking at best practices globally and looking at what people in India are doing, people in, say, South Africa, Zimbabwe, other chili growing regions of the world are doing. And trying to create, first we try to educate farmers, but then you realize they won't trust you because you don't have any credibility. So we set up model farms and started to really implement the suggestions that we were making to see ki yaar actually yield badti hai ki nahi. And some of those things have worked, and it's not something you can do overnight, but we feel like if we continue to invest in those, in farmer education, working with progressive people, educating them and ourselves about how things are done in a better way, this is going to take some time, but we'll get there.
Okay. And what other crops do you think you can really strengthen the...
Immediately, so like if I look at immediate interventions, and I feel like this is something that nobody is again talking about, Europe has raised their bar for agricultural imports which have pesticide. Pakistan is exporting rice. Pakistan is exporting kasuri. We're exporting a lot that we grow here too. They're being lenient now, but in another year or so, you'll see that we won't actually be able to export anything to Europe till we make sure that the farmers are using the right pesticides in the right quantities. That's something the government should take notice of and actually implement immediately. Kasuri methi is a great example. That's something we ought to do like today. Then there's turmeric, plum, you name it, cumin, coriander, everything. All of these things are affected by this pesticide law, and we lose a huge amount of our spice export if we don't do something about it immediately.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Shan also introduced a new range of products lately over the last few years. What led to that?
Which ones are you talking about? You launch things all the time.
Sauces, liquid, display.
So Dipit is an independent company that I run with my husband. Has very little to do with Shan in the broader sense. We operate completely independently. That came out of a desire to... I was running a restaurant and I realized all the sauces are imported. And why is anyone not actually making it? And I really was very interested in fermentation and making hot sauces. So we leveraged an interest that we had combined with the gap that we saw in the market, and we ran with it. So it's been we didn't look.
And what other products do you think Shan can really expand into in the future?
I think it's important to look at other places like Pakistan, which have a growing economy or growing demand for value-added products, and see ki gaps kahan hai. You go into any store and the gaps are all there, and the opportunities are there for the taking. There really are a lot of opportunities. I don't think people see them, but they're there.
Okay, that makes sense. So, how would you feel, or let's say, what needs to be done? I'll come back to my earlier question. What needs to be done to, let's say, 10x your exports at this point? What would be the vision for that?
I think we've reached a point where we feel like we need to work closely with both, set up associations and work closely with our competition as well, and talk to the government. That a lot of policies that affect us, both in terms of food laws and food security and safety, that we not only educating them, but also making sure that business growth is ensured. You don't want people to move your volumes from one country to another because, here it's punitive to grow. If people here think that the local demand is enough to, kind of deprioritize export, because that's essentially what's happening right now. We've never gotten a subsidy in our life, but we're all being painted with the same brush, you see. And I find it hard to talk to people now because everybody is so against talking about, changing anything about our taxation. I think people are happy with it largely, or at least in my circles, you don't see much conversation around it. But in some cases, if I look at Dipit, it's a small business, and we want to fund our growth in Pakistan by creating export demand. But if you're going to make it so punitive, then how are we going to grow? So I don't know what the answers are. I don't know how to move forward. We're just going to keep our head down and keep at it and somehow figure our way out of this crisis. But I don't have the answers, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what do you think in terms of export? Do you think it makes sense to manufacture things locally and export, or manufacture in different manufacturing hubs and then basically export from there?
I think there's no one size fits all. I think for certain companies, it may be better to operate out of Pakistan because the operating costs are lower. I think that, import substitution for our raw materials would really help. Not any one company cannot do everything. So you find the opportunity, you find a supplier somewhere. You want to come out with sauces, for example. Are there enough local bottle suppliers? Maybe that's an opportunity. Are there enough label manufacturers? So there's many things that go into creating a product. And if someone's looking to get into something, maybe something that works for a small business right now may not work for a business that's very, very large, which may need to have more efficiency by building units outside and creating and serving those markets quickly. We've seen such a lot of logistical issues that have happened post-COVID or since COVID with the Evergreen and multiple times, or even with the war right now. We do see logistic challenges as making, a huge impact, an act of God coming in every single year. So having multiple units may help a business who is trying to grow in that situation. So it's just, so there's no one size fits all.
So why don't you get listed on the exchange?
What would I get listing for? If I have something that I want to do, you're not going to be able to list again and again. So unless I have something that I want to really do with that money, it doesn't make sense to give a bit control of your business just like that. Maybe one day. I think that if I ever were to, that should be my ambition, that if I do ever go for a listing, should be on the NASDAQ and for a global company. That is something I can aspire to. If you're getting on the local market over here, I mean, I don't want to say anything because I'm it's not a fun market to be in, and it's playing to the whims of few people. So let's play to the whims of the world.
And that's right. I mean, if you're an export-oriented business, you become a global business.
And we are a global brand. So you have equity, like I said, in 85 markets. So Pakistan becomes a smaller picture of the bigger pie depending on your vision. So our vision is the whole globe. It's everywhere. From Fiji to Alaska, we're everywhere. So why not think on those terms? And you ask me who we're competing with. We're competing with ourselves and our own limited ideals and, vision. It's how big you want to see and dream, right? We may not get there, but we'll get somewhere close to it, or maybe beyond it.
I think that's great, competing with yourself. And
we have to improve our systems. We have to improve our product. We have to improve ourselves continuously and reinvent, because you can't be who you were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. The world is changing so quickly. So we have to keep up.
So where do you see Shan in 20 years?
Like I said, I think definitely a global company with global equity and a big player in the overall food market. With a diversified portfolio and giving quality products to people everywhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just one last thing. What would Shan do if, let's say, you guys decide to move into a completely different product category? Will that ever happen? Like, say, you're just in the condiment area right now. But you're in the food area. But let's say you start moving towards confectionery. or you start moving like there was some segue towards sauces, which is an independent thing. Let's into confectionery.
I would say that still comes kind of under food. It's what we know, taste. For me, diversification would be like to go in a completely different direction. Would be to go textile or cement or we'd never do that.
So I think the good point here is that taste.
Yeah.
Your category is taste.
Yes.
I think that just,
under that umbrella, whether it's jams, jellies, or even innovation in food, and see what the future categories could be. Maybe we come up with something that doesn't exist right now. R&D is a core focus of our brand, and we like to say that we want to come up with products for the future. So why not something that doesn't exist today?
I think that's great. What? Just can you give me a few names of products that really came out of your R&D?
Bombay Biryani. Bombay Biryani doesn't exist as a variant. My parents came up with that. Or let's say chicken Malay Biryani. A lot of the products you see in our portfolio are products that don't really exist. They may have roots in certain things, but the recipe itself is a combination of something my parents came up with.
Yeah, I can testify to that. In every market, you got a different product. Take it. In Lahore, you'll have a different product. In Karachi, you'll have a different product. I won't go into the details there, but yeah, it was funny at one point.
Sometimes the shops are depicting consumer preferences also.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, that's the good thing about this, right? You're very customized. You're very focused on what the consumer wants in your markets rather than just using one broad.
I mean, ideally, I'd like to have everything available everywhere. That should be my goal across Pakistan. That if you're eating something in Sindh, you should be able to get it everywhere. But that's something maybe that we should look at as an opportunity.
Just one last thing. What's your most popular product?
Bombay Biryani, probably. Yeah.
That's locally or across the world?
I think globally.
Globally?
Yeah, I think it's one of our top 10 products, maybe top 5. Globally would be probably something like a tandoori.
Tandoori chicken.
Yeah. Biryanis are definitely, there's many of them in the top 10. Sindhi biryani is definitely there. Karai, korma, nihari, the usual.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. It was a good conversation. But one thing that really, struck with me was, you're in the business of taste. And that can be anything and everything. Yeah. Thank you, Sammer. Good luck for the future and hope you get listed soon. Thank you. All right. This is it for All Things Money. Till next time. Thank you and bye-bye.